When my boyfriend gained 30 pounds, I started sleeping with his gym trainer. When he found out, I told him it was his fault for letting himself go and that I was trying to motivate him. Now he's calling me heartless, but I think I'm the victim here for having to watch the man I love turn into someone disgusting. Before I walk you through the full story, I just have a small favor to ask. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments. What city are you watching from? It's always amazing to see how far this audience is reaching. This morning, Jake found text messages between me and Marcus on my phone. He was going through my photos looking for something when he saw the conversation thread. His face went completely white as he scrolled through weeks of messages between us. When he got to the part where Marcus and I were planning to meet at his apartment, Jake looked at me like he'd never seen me before. He asked if I was sleeping with Marcus, and I had to tell him the truth. I explained that it had only happened a few times over the past month, and that he had driven me to this point by completely giving up on his appearance. I told him that if he had taken better care of himself, I never would have been attracted to someone else. Jake started yelling about how I'd betrayed our entire relationship over some weight gain. I tried to explain that 30 pounds wasn't just some weight gain, it was a complete change in who he was as a person. I told him that when we first met, he was fit and attractive and took pride in how he looked. But over the past 8 months, he'd turned into someone I barely recognized. He said he couldn't believe I was blaming him for my decision to cheat. I corrected him that I wasn't blaming him. I was explaining the cause and effect of his choices. When someone stops caring about themselves, their partner naturally starts looking elsewhere for the qualities they fell in love with. That's just basic relationship psychology. Jake said I was insane if I thought his weight gain justified sleeping with another man. I told him that Marcus represented everything Jake used to be before he got comfortable and lazy. Marcus takes care of his body, he's disciplined about fitness, and he appreciates a woman who works hard to stay in shape. Those are qualities that matter in a relationship. He asked how long this had been going on, and I told him about a month of actual physical involvement, but that I'd been feeling disconnected from him for much longer. I explained that I'd tried to motivate him with subtle hints and suggestions, but he'd ignored every opportunity I gave him to improve himself. Jake said he'd been working 60-hour weeks at his new job, and that stress was the reason for his weight gain. I told him that plenty of successful people manage to stay in shape despite demanding careers. Stress is just an excuse that people use when they don't want to prioritize their health and appearance. He said he was moving out and that our relationship was over. I asked him if he was really going to throw away 2 years together instead of just going back to the gym and fixing the problem. He said the problem wasn't his weight. The problem was that I'd slept with another man and was acting like it was his fault. I tried to explain that I wasn't acting like anything. I was simply being honest about what led to this situation. But Jake was too emotional to have a rational conversation. He packed his bags and left without even trying to understand my perspective. My name is Ashley. I'm 26 years old, and I work as a yoga instructor at Fitness Plus downtown. I've been with Jake for 2 years, and we moved in together 8 months ago when he got promoted to senior developer at his tech company. I've always been passionate about health and fitness, and I believe that taking care of your body is one of the most important things you can do in life. Jake used to share my values about fitness and healthy living. When we first met at a rock climbing gym, he was in amazing shape. He had defined abs, muscular arms, and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you look good. He told me he worked out 5 times a week and followed a strict nutrition plan to stay lean and strong. During our first year together, we were the perfect couple. We'd go hiking on weekends, try new fitness classes together, and motivate each other to eat healthy meals. Jake would compliment my dedication to staying in shape, and I'd encourage him to push harder during his workouts. We both understood that physical attraction was an important part of our relationship. But everything changed when Jake got his promotion 8 months ago. Suddenly, he was working longer hours and coming home exhausted every night. Instead of going to the gym after work like he used to, he'd collapse on the couch with takeout food and watch Netflix until bedtime. I tried to be understanding at first, thinking it was just a temporary adjustment period. The first time I really noticed the change was about 8 months ago when we were getting ready to move in together. Jake was trying to lift a heavy box, and I could see that his stomach had gotten soft and round. His arms looked smaller too, like all the muscle definition he'd worked so hard for was disappearing under a layer of fat. I made a gentle comment about how maybe we should find a gym near our new apartment so we could get back into our routine. Jake said he was too tired to think about working out right now, and that once things settled down at work, he'd get back on track. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. But weeks turned into months, and Jake's body kept changing for the worse. His clothes started fitting differently, and he had to buy new pants in a larger size. When we'd go out to dinner, he'd order the heaviest, most caloric items on the menu without any consideration for how they'd affect his waistline. It was like watching someone I loved slowly destroy themselves. I tried to help by suggesting we cook healthy meals at home instead of ordering pizza and Chinese food every night. Jake would agree in principle, but then he'd come home from work too tired to prep vegetables or grilled chicken. He'd say it was easier to just order something quick so we could relax together. I started meal prepping for both of us on Sundays, making portion containers of lean protein and vegetables that he could just heat up when he got home. But Jake would eat his healthy dinner and then snack on chips and ice cream later while watching TV. He said he needed comfort food to decompress from his stressful day. By the 5-month mark, Jake had gained at least 20 pounds. His face was rounder, his clothes were tight, and he'd completely lost the athletic build that had attracted me to him in the first place. When I suggested he might want to start working out again, he'd get defensive and say that his weight didn't matter as much as his career success. I tried to explain that I wasn't asking him to choose between his job and his health, just to find some balance. Successful people in demanding careers manage to stay fit all the time. But Jake acted like I was being unreasonable for expecting him to maintain the same standards he'd had when we first got together. The worst part was how our physical relationship started suffering because of his weight gain. It's hard to feel attracted to someone when their body has changed so dramatically from what initially drew you to them. I tried to hide my feelings, but Jake could tell something was different between us. When he asked if I was still attracted to him, I tried to be honest but gentle. I told him that attraction was partly physical and that when someone's appearance changes significantly, it naturally affects how their partner feels. I said I loved him as a person, but that I missed the confident, fit man I'd fallen in love with. Jake got upset and said I was being shallow. I explained that physical attraction wasn't shallow. It was a normal and healthy part of romantic relationships. People who let themselves go are essentially telling their partner that maintaining attraction isn't a priority for them. 3 months ago, everything changed when Marcus started working at my gym. He was exactly what Jake used to be before he got comfortable and stopped trying. Marcus was 28, incredibly fit, and took obvious pride in maintaining his physique. He had the kind of discipline and self control that I'd been missing in my relationship. Marcus was a personal trainer, so we'd chat about fitness and nutrition during my breaks between yoga classes. He'd compliment my dedication to staying in shape and ask questions about my workout routine. It felt amazing to talk to someone who understood the importance of health and fitness. One day, Marcus asked about my boyfriend, wondering if Jake also worked out regularly. I laughed and said that Jake used to be very fit, but that he'd completely given up on exercise since getting a demanding job. Marcus seemed surprised that someone would let career stress affect their physical health so dramatically. He said it was impressive that I maintained my discipline despite not having a partner who shared my values. He told me that most people need a supportive partner to stay motivated and that he admired my independence. It was exactly what I needed to hear after months of feeling like Jake didn't appreciate my efforts. Marcus and I started talking more frequently, usually after the gym closed when we were both finishing up our work. He'd ask about my day and listen when I vented about Jake's continued weight gain and lack of motivation. Unlike Jake, Marcus understood that fitness was a lifestyle choice, not just a hobby you could abandon when life got busy. I found myself looking forward to these conversations more than I looked forward to going home to Jake. Marcus represented everything I valued in a partner, while Jake represented everything I was trying to avoid becoming. The contrast between them became more obvious every day. One evening about a month ago, Marcus offered to give me a private training session after the gym closed. He said he'd noticed some areas where I could improve my form, and that he wanted to help me reach my fitness goals. I was excited to work with someone who took training as seriously as I did. During the session, Marcus was very hands on with correcting my posture and positioning. When he'd adjust my form, I could feel how strong and firm his body was compared to Jake's soft, out of shape physique. The physical contact made me realize how much I'd been missing that kind of attraction in my relationship. After we finished the workout, Marcus commented on how dedicated I was to maintaining my body despite not having support at home. He said Jake was lucky to have a girlfriend who cared so much about staying healthy and attractive. Then he asked if I wanted to come back to his apartment for a protein shake and to see his home gym set up. I knew I probably shouldn't go, but I was curious to see how someone really committed to fitness lived. Marcus's apartment was exactly what I'd expected: clean, organized, with high quality exercise equipment and healthy food in the refrigerator. It was the complete opposite of the mess Jake and I lived in, with our takeout containers and his XL clothes scattered everywhere. Marcus made us protein shakes and showed me his meal prep for the week. Everything was perfectly portioned and planned, demonstrating the kind of discipline that Jake had completely abandoned. As we talked about nutrition and training philosophy, I felt more connected to Marcus than I had to Jake in months. When Marcus leaned in to kiss me, it felt natural and right. Here was someone who understood my values and priorities, someone who wouldn't judge me for caring about physical fitness and attraction. The kiss led to more, and for the first time in months, I felt desired by someone who was actually desirable himself. Afterward, I didn't feel guilty because I understood what had happened. Jake had essentially pushed me toward someone else by abandoning the qualities that had made me fall in love with him. If he had maintained his fitness and discipline, I never would have been attracted to Marcus in the first place. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus and I met regularly after work. I'd tell Jake I was staying late for additional training or fitness seminars, which wasn't technically a lie since I was learning about fitness from someone who actually practiced what he preached. Marcus appreciated my body and my dedication in ways that Jake had forgotten how to do. Being with Marcus reminded me what it felt like to be with a real man who took care of himself. In bed, I could feel his muscles and see the definition in his abs and arms. It was such a contrast to Jake's soft belly and flabby chest that I wondered how I'd been settling for so little for so long. Marcus would tell me that I deserved a partner who matched my level of commitment to health and fitness. He said it was rare to find a woman who understood that taking care of your body was a form of self-respect, and that Jake was foolish for not appreciating what he had. I started to see our relationship as more than just physical attraction. Marcus and I shared fundamental values about discipline, health, and personal responsibility that Jake had abandoned. We both believed that people should strive to be the best versions of themselves, not make excuses for letting themselves go. Jake, meanwhile, continued gaining weight and making excuses for his lack of self-control. He'd bought new clothes and even larger sizes instead of addressing the root problem. When I'd suggest going for walks together or cooking healthy meals, he'd say he was too tired or that it wasn't a priority right now. The contrast between my two relationships became impossible to ignore. With Marcus, I felt motivated and appreciated. With Jake, I felt like I was watching someone I once loved slowly give up on himself. It wasn't that I'd stopped caring about Jake, but rather that he'd stopped being the person I'd fallen in love with. I tried to give Jake opportunities to change course. I'd mention new fitness classes we could try together, or suggest that we start meal planning to get back on track with healthy eating. But he'd always find reasons why it wasn't the right time, or why his work stress made it impossible to focus on fitness. When Jake would ask why I was spending so much time at the gym lately, I'd explain that I was advancing my career by learning new training techniques and building professional relationships. This was true, even if it wasn't the complete truth. Marcus was helping me grow as a fitness professional while also giving me the physical and emotional connection I was missing at home. I wasn't trying to hurt Jake or end our relationship. I was trying to get my needs met while hoping he'd eventually realize what he was losing and make changes. I thought that if he saw me becoming more confident and fit, it might motivate him to get back in shape himself. But Jake seemed oblivious to the changes in our relationship. He was so focused on his job and comfortable with his new larger body that he didn't notice how distant I'd become. When I'd come home energized from my time with Marcus, Jake would just assume it was from a good workout. The situation couldn't last forever, and I knew eventually Jake would figure out what was happening. Part of me hoped he'd discover the truth, and it would be the wake up call he needed to start taking care of himself again. If he'd fought for our relationship by getting back in shape, I would have ended things with Marcus immediately. But instead of stepping up his game, Jake just got more comfortable with mediocrity. He'd joke about his dad bod, even though we didn't have children. He'd say that real love meant accepting someone regardless of their appearance, not understanding that attraction and acceptance aren't the same thing. I realized that Jake and I had fundamentally different philosophies about relationships and personal responsibility. He believed that once you found someone who loved you, you could stop trying to be attractive and impressive. I believed that real love meant continuing to be the best version of yourself for your partner. When Jake found the messages this morning, I wasn't surprised or ashamed. I'd been honest about my feelings and needs throughout his weight gain, and he'd chosen to ignore them. The affair with Marcus was a natural consequence of Jake's decision to let himself go. I tried to explain this to Jake, but he was too emotional to understand the logic of the situation. He kept saying I'd betrayed him, when really he'd betrayed the person he'd been when we first got together. The confident, fit man I'd fallen in love with had disappeared, replaced by someone who made excuses instead of efforts. Jake said he was leaving and that he never wanted to see me again. I asked if he was really going to throw away our relationship instead of just going back to the gym and fixing the underlying problem. He said there was nothing to fix except my inability to be faithful and loyal. I told him that faithfulness worked both ways and that being faithful to your partner meant staying attractive for them. Jake had been unfaithful to our relationship by abandoning his commitment to fitness and health. My connection with Marcus was just a symptom of Jake's larger failure to be the man I'd fallen in love with. After Jake left, I called Marcus to tell him what had happened, but his phone went straight to voicemail, and when I texted him, he didn't respond right away like he usually did. I figured he was probably just busy with clients, but as the day went on, I started to worry that he was having second thoughts about our relationship. The next day at work, Marcus was polite but distant. When I tried to talk to him about Jake finding out, he said we should probably cool things down for a while until the situation settled. He said he didn't want drama at work, and that maybe we'd moved too fast. I was confused because Marcus had been the one pursuing me and telling me I deserved better than Jake. Now that I was actually available to be with him properly, he seemed to be backing away. When I asked if we could meet after work to talk about our future, he said he needed some space to think. Over the next few days, it became clear that Marcus had no intention of having a real relationship with me. He started flirting with Sarah from the front desk, the same way he'd flirted with me when we first met. I realized that for him, I'd just been a fun distraction, not a serious romantic prospect. Some of my coworkers had heard about what happened with Jake, and I could tell they were judging me for getting involved with a colleague. Linda, the gym manager, even pulled me aside to remind me about the policy against personal relationships between staff members. I felt like everyone was taking Jake's side without understanding my perspective. I tried calling Jake to explain that things with Marcus hadn't worked out the way I'd expected, and that maybe we could talk about fixing our relationship. But he'd blocked my number, and when I went to our apartment, I found that he'd already moved out all of his stuff. Jake's friends started posting supportive messages on social media about him dodging a bullet and being better off without toxic people. Nobody seemed to understand that I'd been trying to motivate him to be healthier and more attractive. They acted like I was some kind of villain for having standards and expectations. My own friends were divided about the situation. Some understood that physical attraction was important in relationships and that Jake had really let himself go. But others said I should have broken up with him before getting involved with someone else. They didn't understand that I was trying to save our relationship, not end it. I ended up having to find a new apartment because I couldn't afford the rent on our old place by myself. Jake had been paying the larger share because he made more money, and I'd never realized how much I'd been depending on his financial support. Moving to a smaller, cheaper place felt like I was being punished for having reasonable expectations about my partner's appearance. At my new apartment, I had time to reflect on everything that had happened. I still believed that I'd done nothing wrong by seeking out the attraction and appreciation I wasn't getting at home. Jake had created the problem by gaining weight and losing his motivation to stay fit. If Jake had maintained the same level of fitness he'd had when we met, I never would have looked elsewhere for physical and emotional connection. He'd essentially forced me to find elsewhere what he was no longer providing in our relationship. That wasn't my fault, it was the predictable result of his choices. I started dating again, but it was difficult to find men who understood my perspective about fitness and personal responsibility. Many guys would say they agreed that staying in shape was important, but then they'd make excuses about why they couldn't commit to regular exercise or healthy eating. I realized that most people, like Jake, were willing to put in effort at the beginning of a relationship, but then got lazy once they felt secure. They didn't understand that attraction required ongoing maintenance, not just initial chemistry. Finding someone who shared my long term values about health and fitness was going to be more challenging than I'd expected. Sometimes I wondered if I should have handled things differently with Jake. Maybe I could have been more direct about my dissatisfaction with his weight gain, or given him an ultimatum about getting back in shape. But I'd tried gentle encouragement and suggestions for months, and he'd ignored all of them. I also wondered if I should have ended our relationship before getting involved with Marcus. But that seemed like giving up on 2 years together without trying to show Jake what he was missing. My connection with Marcus had been intended as motivation for Jake, not as a replacement for him. The whole experience taught me important lessons about compatibility and communication in relationships. Physical attraction isn't shallow or optional, it's a fundamental requirement for romantic connection. Partners who stop making an effort to stay attractive are essentially choosing to end the romantic aspect of their relationship.